Kim and potentially Deputy Mayor Lawrence Kirby as well. So I'm sure I'll be kept abreast of what's going on behind me as well, having been in that situation of being online quite a bit over the last 6 weeks. Yes, do realise the importance of being acknowledged in that space. Also, I want to acknowledge Mandy and Kate down there, who are going to be speaking to us today on the smoking and vaping harm in Kāpiti, which is going to be very timely with regards to leading into our work on our strategy in this space as well. I just also wanted to acknowledge how great it is to be back at the table, but also acknowledge the grace that's allowed me to be here as well. Yeah, so we'll leave that one at that. No apologies received as such, and just noting here that we're intending to swap one item around on the agenda, which will be part of members' business, the members' activities as such. We're going to move that to the end of the meeting so that we can get our presentations underway. And depending on how long this meeting particularly takes will dictate how long we've got to talk in that space. I'm picking there could be a little bit of a chat there as well. And noting the leave of absence of our Councillor Rob Kirby, the co-food there as well. I'm expecting the Mayor and Councillor Hanford actually to be popping in here when they finish their meeting upstairs. Item 2, the Council blessing. I'll do that. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in the spirit of harmony and compassion, which is fantastic. Apologies. We have done apologies. None to take on board. Declarations of interest relating to the items of the agenda. I haven't been made aware of any. Does anyone have any they wish to declare at all? No? Fantastic. Public speaking time in relation to the agenda. Again, I haven't had anyone referred to me. No one here as such? No. Fantastic. Members' business. We have gone through leaves of absence already. Matters of an urgent nature. A certain issue with a car this morning has now been dealt with, which is fantastic. And other than that, I haven't heard of anything in that space. And as I said, we're now moving the members' activities to the tail end. So without further ado, we will move on to number 7, updates. 7.1, discussions of smoking and vaping harm in Kāpiti in the context of the review of our smoke-free policy. We have Hamish, I think, are you talking to this one, or are all three of you talking together? All three? Fantastic. Please come up to the table. Actually, yeah, you're more than welcome to come down here, but you might actually find it easier down there since you've got a microphone each. Well, but completely and utterly your preference. But Hamish, if you can come up here, that'd be great. So I'll leave it to Hamish to do the introduction and run this part of the meeting, if that's fine with you, Hamish.
Kia ora koutou. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having us along this morning to give you a bit of information and context relating to the review of our smoke-free policy with the work underway. So first of all, I'd just like to take the opportunity to introduce you this morning to Mandy Savage down the end, who's our Kāpiti Coordinator and Senior Health Promoter for the Cancer Society. And then also we've got Kate Nayland, who's Public Health Advisor from the National Public Health Service, looking after the Capital Coast, Hutt Valley and Wairarapa areas. So thank you very much for coming along. And this morning I'm going to provide a little bit of a brief introduction and a refresh around where we are on the review of the smoke-free policy. And then I'm going to hand over to Mandy and Kate, who are here just to provide some context and information around some of the challenges and impacts around smoking within the district ahead of our policy processes. So if we could just bring up the presentation. Sorry, I thought it came through. I might just need to pause. Yeah.
So we're just working on getting the presentation up and running. I guess a little bit of background, I can tell a story, why not? At the last local government conference last year, I was harassed by the Regional Health Authority around where we sit in the smoke-free space. Harassed in a very good way, I do assure you, as a sheet was held up and compared to us and to a lot of other areas in the district. So that's been taken on board, and that's going to be leading to our smoke-free strategy, or I was going to say our smoking strategy, but that's more likely not the best way to put that forward. Thank you, Mandy. You've been a champion in this space leading into this conversation. I'm very. It's great that we've been able to facilitate your coming to the table now in a more constructive manner with regards to actually feeding into policy as well. Very much looking forward to that. How are we going with that?
It's
fantastic. There we go.
Up onto a memory stick. Apologies. So we'll just load up the slides anyway, but I can still proceed with providing a little bit of the background. I'm just building on what Chair's provided. But currently, our smoke-free policy and playgrounds policy dates back to 2008 and had a focus on how we can manage smoking at that point in time and across some of our public spaces and playgrounds in particular. Since that time, there has been some changes in the wider legislation around some of the smoke-free policy. Also, there's been, since 2008, quite a change in how councils across the motu are looking to manage how they manage smoking and smoke-free areas across their districts. One of the key considerations that's actually occurred during that time is, of course, vaping and the advent of vaping as well. So that's an important part of the context around consideration coming forward. So again, the policy itself has been wrapped up alongside other work that's coming through with a health lens, impacts on the communities alongside our local alcohol policy, but also our gambling policies as well. And so the third one we had as part of that set is around that smoke-free policy and the review of it. So we're actually coming back to you on the 24th of August at this point in time with a proposal around what the changes are that we could potentially look at around making changes and reflecting some of the considerations. So today is really about providing information to help inform your thinking when that proposal comes back to the table. So if we move now, so at this stage I'm just going to hand over to our two speakers just to work through their slides and provide some context for your information.
Thank you. So, kia ora koutou, ko Kate Nayland Tukuingoa. I'm from National Public Health Service. So, as this slide shows, there have been a number of steps taken over the last 40 years in order to reduce the harms smoking causes. The government's Smoke-Free Aotearoa 2025 Action Plan is the latest measure introduced. This document outlines the government's vision of eliminating the harm smoke tobacco causes, with the goal of reaching a daily smoking prevalence of less than 5%. Some of the key legislative changes that will occur over the next few years are: next year in 2024, the number of smoke tobacco retailers will reduce nationally from 6,000 to 600. For the Kāpiti region, this will mean approximately 7 retailers for your whole district. We might also see an increase in the number of vape retailers accordingly. In 2025, the government will bring in low nicotine cigarettes, and in 2027, we will see the smoke-free generation implemented, where anyone born after 2009 will no longer be able to purchase cigarettes. So my question for this council is, what is your role in achieving this smoke-free goal? What is your duty of care? As Martin has already commented, the current smoke-free policy is not as comprehensive as other councils within the Wellington region. So is your contribution putting in place a more robust policy that incorporates elements such as smoke-free, vape-free bus stops, beaches, or council buildings? The 2018 census showed that 11% of your total population were regular smokers. If we look just at the Māori population, Regular smokers were at 24%. Whilst we don't have current data for the Kāpiti region, current national rates have reduced, with daily smoking at 8% nationally across all ethnicities. And looking just at the Māori population, daily smoking is at 19% currently. So we still have a way to go to reach that 5% smoke-free goal. So now is not the time to take the foot off the accelerator. Looking at age demographics for your region, the highest smoking rates based on 2018 census data were those of the 15 to 29 year age bracket. Smoking rates for this group have likely since declined. One reason for this possible decline could be due to the uptake of vaping. Ōtaki has the highest prevalence of smoking across the region. The 2018 census showed that 18% of the people living in Ōtaki were regular smokers. For the Māori population, 25% were regular smokers. This distribution is unsurprising given the demographic profile of Ōtaki. Waikanae has the lowest smoking prevalence for the region. Māori and Pacific people have a higher prevalence of smoking compared to other ethnicities. This mirrors national trends. However, Māori women in Kāpiti are less likely to report being a regular smoker than the national average. And this is where I'm handing back to Mandy.
Apologies for the frantic phone calls. I have a very unwell elderly parent, so apologies for that. Kia ora koutou, I'm Mandy, as already you know, from the Cancer Society. My role in this is to talk to the vaping slides around vaping harms and context in Kāpiti around vaping, and a little bit on smoking, which I'll come to later. Unfortunately, you can see there's some data missing from this slide, and that is around the 15 to 17-year-olds. You'll see the next age group up, significant increases in self-reported vaping. I think if we had the information, you would see the same for that younger teen cohort, which is what we see in this slide, basically smoking falling off the graph and a significant increase in vaping in our young people. So locally, where are people getting their tobacco and their vapes from? This shows the communities, and it also shows the distribution of our tobacco outlets and our specialist vape retailers. I'd just like to draw your attention to the fact that there are now 9 specialist vape retailers, not the 6 that are listed there. That's, yeah, Ōtaki to Paikakariki. The other thing that you'll see there is a bit of clustering around our lowest socioeconomic neighbourhoods, unfortunately. I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that there are more tobacco outlets in Paraparaumu Central than any other neighbourhood in the Wellington region. So our feeling is it shouldn't be a race to the bottom, and we feel that improving our smoke-free and vape-free policy provision in Kāpiti is one way that we can help to denormalise smoking and vaping in the way it's seen in our community. So where are our college kids getting their vapes from? The obvious ones you'd expect, the good old local dairies and their friends, their mates. I wanted to bring a college student with me today. We do have some health promotion volunteers that support the Cancer Society. Unfortunately, they're all busy with assessments, but I did speak to some teens at Paraparaumu College, and this is what they told me. Vaping is happening a lot in toilets. So the response from the colleges is to lock blocks of toilets. They're closed, a lot of them at lunchtime. There is monitored access, but it's causing anxiety, particularly in the younger students, walking through a cloud of vape just to get to the loo. And as you'd expect, there's a bit of peer pressure to take a hit as well. As with smoking, vaping's happening on the fields. However, unlike smoking, vaping is happening in the classroom. And this is because students can wear a large baggy hoodie, pockets, hood. Vapes are small. It's really easy to disguise that hand-to-mouth action. And if you're a busy teacher working with other kids, you're not going to notice it. Those that don't vape in the class, they're heading off to the loos frequently, disrupting their learning and the learning of those students around them. The other interesting thing I've heard from our rangatahi is that for those that want to quit, so maybe around year 12, whatever, they're over vaping, they're sick of it, they're finding it tough. A couple of reasons. Nicotine is highly addictive, but also the fact the vapes are everywhere. Even if they don't own one, their mate's got one, so it's really easy to get that hit. I'm going to go a bit off track here. I'm going to talk about personal harms rather than the financial harms for what we know in Kāpiti. So we know that smoking causes 1 in 4 cancer deaths. It's a major cause of blindness. 1,300 people every year have untreatable blindness due to their smoking. If you're pregnant, the smoke's a poison that's going to enter your bloodstream, cross the placenta, and cause harm to your baby's health. Smoking increases the risk of developing a range of cancers. We all know about lung cancer. What about oral cavity, pharynx, larynx, esophagus, pancreas, cervix, colon, rectum, stomach, and bladder cancer? It's quite a list. Smoking increases the risk of developing diseases of the urinary tract, pelvis, bladder, and digestive tract. 40% of all strokes in the under 65s are caused by smoking. 40% of heart disease in the under 65s are caused by smoking. And your smokers have a 2 to 3 times risk of a sudden cardiac death compared to a non-smoker. I'm also going to go slightly off-piste on vaping harm. Vaping is a recent phenomenon, as we know. There's a lack of long-term clinical data that can be used to accurately assess population health risk. There is evidence that some products can deliver low levels of known carcinogens. These include nicotine-derived nitrosamine ketone, which may increase the risk of lung cancer, even at low doses, and also formaldehyde, suggesting there may be some risk in their long-term use. Researchers also found vapors were exposed to toxicologically significant levels of carbonyl compounds, so formaldehyde. But here's what we know for absolute certainty about the harms of vaping. Most vapes contain nicotine, a highly addictive drug. It harms cognitive development in children and young people. Nicotine addiction causes behavioural problems, increases anxiety and makes it hard to concentrate. Young people share vapes, so that means they don't know if there is nicotine or cannabis in their vapes. And of course, nicotine is highly addictive. Once you're vaping, it's actually really hard to quit. And lastly, I know you guys have seen this before. It's a really great infographic summary of what other councils are doing and where we sit. Like I said earlier, it shouldn't be a race to the bottom. I'm really, really keen to be part of the process and have the opportunity to provide whatever support we can to help increase our smoke-free and vape-free provision in this community. As you can see, there's quite a way to go. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Very sobering statistics, to say the least. Hamish, you got anything you want to add to any of that at all? Chris?
I do. Just to add, and apologies for my late arrival. We, as well as working around our smoke-free policy with our colleagues from the Cancer Society and Health, we are also going to be using this as input to our health strategy and thinking about some of the limitations of the policy we have, but what more we can do outside of a policy. Today what you've heard, I know we've said think about the policy that's coming your way, but I also want to say to you to think about more broadly what we might want to think about as important for the health strategy that we will soon come to talk to you about.
Okay. Questions, anyone? I am conscious that, Mandy, you have to head off at 10:30. That's right, to an appointment. I do think we'll be done before then. I might start off with a couple of quick questions. Actually, the first one's to Hamish. You said there's something coming to, I'm assuming, a full council meeting or social strategy and ops meeting, so on the 24th. Is that more a strategic framework with regards to how we're approaching the policy around this?
Yes.
Yep, okay, that's cool. Question for you ladies. Obviously vaping is an issue. To me, I would make a comparison. It's a little bit like the psychedelic substances that came in. In other words, it's something that slipped under regulation and government isn't quite sure how to approach it. And this is one of those things that needs to be dealt with quickly. But as we know, governments are a little bit slow in that space. So I'm going to digress here for a second. It was mentioned that the smoke-free policy that's coming through central government talks to a limited amount of outlets. That's 7 outlets in the district, is that right? Could you just remind me when that's coming in?
What month next year?
I'm not sure of the month, but it's 2024. It might be July. Is that what you're on? Okay.
July as well.
Yeah.
And are you aware of how this is going to be implemented as such? I mean, obviously there's going to be a little bit of pain for a lot of outlets with regards to that. Has there been any flow through with regards to how this is all going to work as such?
My understanding is that if you wanted to be one of those tobacco retailers, that you had to put in an application by this year, and that a selection process would be made. In terms of what criteria they're using, I'm not sure. I have had some discussions with the Tobacco Regulatory Authority to suggest that supermarkets might be an ideal candidate because they have a lot of security, bollards in front, likely to be impacted as much by things like ram raids. But the impression that I got from them is that they don't want to give it solely to one type of retailer, so they want to share it among. Did you have anything?
No, my understanding is the same. It's yet to be hammered out.
Okay. And have you heard anything with regards to how they are looking at approaching the vaping sort of scenario? Again, it's not rocket science. You know, smoking goes down, vaping goes up. The outlets close, so vaping will just jump another notch, more than likely as well, or 2 or 3 notches. Is there any talk about an approach to controlling vaping that you're hearing through processes at all? Again, I look at the psychedelic substances one, which was a area, how many you could have in a certain area, or only having an area where they could be purchased. Is there any talk about heading down that path? Have you heard anything about that at all?
No, my understanding is that there will be, like you said, that anticipated jump in the number of retailers. I'm not quite sure in terms of the details of that as yet. Have you heard anything? No, I'm sorry.
I would just also say that vaping for the government is seen as a cessation tool, so they're not keen to, my impression is they're not keen to do what Australia's done and make it hard to access because they want to reach that 5%.
Is that based on evidence as such? Because to me that's just a misnomer. You're just moving nicotine addiction from one thing to another. That's the whole point of trying to, and that's not up to you to answer. That's the policy question. I'll open the floor for questions. I didn't actually see who was first. Nigel? Nigel?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, just on that, the retailers. So how many are there currently? How many current retailer? You did say. I'm sorry, I didn't get that number in Kāpiti.
You're talking about tobacco retailers or specialist vapes?
Tobacco.
45.
So then 45 then 7. Yeah, I'd be a bit concerned about because, yeah, it's likely that. Oh, that's okay. Somebody probably just ringing you to tell you to turn my mic on. Yeah, so I understand that. My concern is that it will just go into supermarkets, and we all know how much we can trust the corporations with this stuff. So one of the questions around that is if there's going to be 7, regardless of who they are, if that business closes down, will it be a sinking lid policy like with the poker machine? So if a business shuts down, the poker machine license goes with them. They've got around that by doing mergers. But so yeah, so that's the question. I don't know if you know the answer to that, but I'm interested to see if that's the case.
The sinking lid policy. I think that has yet to be hammered out. I mean, we don't know. Is it going to be based on population numbers where these are going to go? Is it going to be based on type of outlets? There's so many questions. I'm not sure. I mean, personally, I support the sinking lid approach, but that's only my personal opinion, not that of the Cancer Society.
The other one is in relation to vaping. So there are currently 9 vape retailers. Yeah, in Kāpiti, right? And it isn't a cessation tool at all, as all the evidence shows that that's not the case. So what's the plan for reducing those numbers? Because they're actually burgeoning. Those numbers are growing. Like if we look how many there were 5 years ago, for instance.
There was only 6. So, for example, that map we showed you, that infographic, was that 2022 was 6? So there's now 9. In terms of cutting the numbers, I think that's probably problematic because of the fact that our tobacco retailers are going down. But as you guys will be aware, there have been recent measures introduced around the specialist vape retailers, for example, proximity to schools, marae, etc. But as for capping the general numbers, I'm not quite sure. Kate, do you have any comments on that?
I don't know what the government's plan is. I do know that they see it as youth vaping as an issue and they want to address it, but I'm not sure if they know how yet. One of the things currently with the legislation is if a vape retailer meets the criteria to be a specialist vape retailer, they have to get approved. So I have been exploring recently with Wellington City Council whether it's possible for councils to put in a bylaw that might limit the proximity or density of vape stores, but with the current legislation written as it is, it doesn't seem like that's possible. So perhaps advocating for legislative change, which allows councils to control the location of vape stores and how many they want, might be an avenue to pursue.
Like to see some feedback from staff perhaps about at the moment we have the district licensing committee determines who gets licenses and when and where, etc. And I'd like to see the same thing for vaping. Then the community has a say. People who make an application have to go through a process to prove that it's beneficial to the community that they live in, etc. So that's perhaps something. I don't know if you guys are advocating on a national level for that local commitment, but it might be worth something having a think about as well. But thanks for the work you're doing. Great.
Thank you. I'll just ask one quick piece of clarity, or 2 bits of clarity actually. You talk about specialist shops. Is there leeway for things like dairies and that sort of stuff to include vapes as part of their sales? I mean, can you only get vapes from specialist shops, or can you get them from other sources as well?
It's a free-for-all, isn't it?
So there are 2 types of vape retailers. There's specialist vape retailers. They're the ones that can sell flavoured vapes. so your strawberries and your bananas. And then there's the dairies, and they're only allowed to sell mint, menthol, or tobacco flavoured vapes.
Dairies get around it is they put up a plywood box and suddenly it's a store within a store. It's a specialist vape retailer.
Right. Okay, that's cool. The second, just point of clarity, you're talking about developing policy. Are you working with the Ministry of Health in that space as such, or is that an internal development of policy as such?
The idea around bylaws, is that what you're talking about?
Just generally, getting this vape under control. Are you working directly with the Ministry of Health in regards to this at all?
Yeah, and the Vaping Regulatory Authority as well.
Lovely, thank you. Kathy.
Thanks. What we're talking about here is taking something away from young people. I'm a parent of children who smoke and grandchildren who vape. So have you given any thought to what we can replace it with? I mean, if you're taking something away, you need something more positive to do rather than vape or smoke. Have you any ideas about what's going to replace it?
It's a tricky one. I mean, what's going to replace it is a lack of anxiety, a lack of mental health issues, mental clarity, lung stamina. I'm not quite sure how to answer your question in terms of what we can actually do or provide. Our role is really putting the evidence out there around the harms, and then it's up to you guys to make your decisions.
It's just that when I was younger and I smoked quite a lot and I went to my GP, he told me it was better that I smoked than took antidepressants. So I don't know whether young people, if they get anxious or that, because sometimes people smoke because they're anxious. I guess what I'm flagging is that there's more of a health issue here than just giving up smoking. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Next speaker is Kim. Kim's online. And just reminding everybody that it's important to wait till our mics do turn red so that the people online can hear as well.
Kia ora, I have a couple of questions and they're similar to Councillor Lawson and Kathy Spies. It's about what are we going to replace it? What's our plan to replace? We had a cessation smoking tool, which is vaping, which is not a tool at all. So then we're going to have to develop a cessation vaping tool, obviously. So what is our plan to develop that cessation vaping tool? And what can council do if government aren't going to push? What extra can council do? So that's my first question. And my second question was, are there, like when we had the tobacco industry, there were restrictions. So the advertising and all that kind of stuff, there was restrictions around it. Now, if I look at these specialist shops, they literally look like lolly shops. They look lit up. They're like Christmas trees. They're the most inviting stores on the block. They look like a gaming room. I didn't even know there was one in Otaki until someone said, actually, that's a vaping store. Because it doesn't look like that. It's so attractive, it's not funny. So are there restrictions we can put on the specialist shops? Because and actually just wipe out the whole flavours? Because while smoking was an issue, yes it wasn't attractive to your 12-year-olds because it tasted like tobacco, so it was yuck. But if you've got flavours, it just tastes like lollies. The third question is, I know it's a replace smoking thing, so it's got nicotine in them. Is there any plan to reduce the nicotine or actually phase out the nicotine out of them? And just speaking to what Kathy said about there has to be something to replace it, and there are wider health issues. Yeah, there are, and they're not all related directly to vapes, like it's screens, it's everything. In our household, trying to battle the screens is an issue. So one of the strategies is you just keep them occupied. So you just keep them doing things so that they minimize their time on screens. So it's horrible. It's horrible seeing these kids vaping. It's absolutely horrible. And it's the effect on the kids that worries me. Adults, they make their choices and, some aren't great. But the fact that these vapes are being targeted at children in a way that cigarettes weren't, It's absolutely disgusting. So those are my 3 questions.
It's not working. Okay.
Okay, just before you answer those, just take one thing I will say, Kim, is there is a certain amount of information that the agencies here are putting together. The decision-making aspects of that are yet to come, and I do think, and I've got some comments around what we can potentially do as well.
Sure. I've just got a couple of responses for you, but I'm sure Kate can elaborate further. Cessation around vaping. Unfortunately, Te Kere Mai Te Ata aren't here today. They employ a young woman called Chalice who actually works in primary schools, intermediates and colleges around supporting rangatahi to quit. Her youngest client, I think, is 9. So our smoking cessation services have acknowledged that alongside the smoking services, there needs to be vaping cessation coaches as well. So certain organisations are working in that space already. I asked her where she was in Kāpiti, and they just don't have the capacity. Her work is primarily in the Hut and in Wellington. I'm hoping at some stage that if it's needed, we will see vaping coaches, quit coaches in this community. As for restrictions and what further restrictions we can put on the specialist vape retailers themselves, I agree. They look like arcades. They're specially designed to look as fun and vibrant and enticing as possible. I'm not quite sure what we could do. Blackout blinds, I don't know if that'd be allowed, but there are some restrictions on them and what they can sell, like, for example, the R18. Kate, what else can you speak to about that?
So yeah, they're not actually allowed to advertise within the store, and you're not allowed to advertise externally either. I think further restrictions we could push the government on are things like plain packaging, not being allowed to have vape in the name, because currently tobacco stores, you're not allowed to use the word tobacco, so I think we could approach that with the vape stores as well. Not being visible from the shop front. And, if you go and buy tobacco, it's all covered up. You can't see it. So, again, replicating those measures with vape retailers as well. What was
The last one was around what to replace it with. Not all vapes have nicotine. Your older model of vapes, the ones that look like the tanks, some of those are just flavoured water. The concern is that the vapes that the young people want, the cheap vapes, the fun, fruity or cinnamon donut, whatever vapes, the ones that are appealing, they're the ones that are the highest concentration of nicotine. So there is the opportunity to reduce the nicotine content overall in the vapes. The amount of nicotine that's tolerated in vapes is the highest in New Zealand compared to any other country except the States.
But I do understand that the government has consulted recently on reducing that number to, do you know what it is?
200? No. They want to cut it by about a third. I think it's 60 micrograms at the moment that's allowable per vape device.
50.
And it's 50.
50.
Sorry,
50 is
50.
the current one, and they may be looking at either 30 or 20 to reduce that max level by.
Kim, are you finished with that? Yep. Okay.
Yes, no, thank you. And just keep up the good work, because this is a real issue, especially in Otaki.
Kia
Mike.
ora.
Kia ora. Thanks, Kate and Mandy. This is an extraordinary important subject, and I think around this table that rangatahi is the most important demographic that this affects. Then the older folk who've grown up with the era of smoking being advertised by doctors and being able to be done on airlines and what have you. And we learnt through that, and it took us a long time, the mention from the chair about the way synthetic cannabis was dealt with back in the 2015. It took a lot longer for central government to take some action before there was deaths and some huge real world consequences. So my question and observation is this: closing and locking toilets down seems, if we've seen in news recently, is just really kind of ambulance at the bottom of the cliff kind of attitude. And it causes other problems for people who need to use toilets, not only legitimately for the purpose of them, but for anxiety and you know, etc. So what regulations or rules are schools that you're interacting with over this subject of vaping doing to manage this? Because they've obviously had to deal with managing mobile phone usage, but this is obviously far more serious for health consequences.
So every school does it differently. My understanding is that every college, Paraparaumu, Kāpiti, Ōtaki, would all have a vaping policy. I'm only familiar with the Paraparaumu College policy. That's where my daughter attends. It's pretty light compared to other colleges. Certain colleges within the Manawatu, you get caught with a vape, you're a warning. Second time you're caught with a vape, you're out. There's the door. Easier to implement a policy like that when there are 5 other schools in the community that your child could potentially attend. Here the policy is, if at Paraparaumu, if you're caught with a vape, then it is confiscated, it's given to your parents. Depending on your parents' feelings, the vape can be handed straight back, or in my home I have a policy called I'll put a hammer to it.
Hammer time.
Which doesn't solve the problem because it means my daughter shares. But, you know, it depends on the demographics of the college and the politics at the college and how draconian they want to be. You're not going to solve the problem around nicotine withdrawal by removing. That's where I think organisations like Te Kere Mai Te Ata do such an awesome job. They go into the colleges and they work with the students and give them practical strategies around reducing their nicotine. Like I said before, there are large groups of rangatahi at our local colleges that are over it. They actually want to quit. They're over, you know, being held to ransom by their nicotine addiction, but it is really hard. So those kids need strategies. So I guess long story short, my point is, regardless of what policy is in place at the college, they need support as well.
Thank you. And I'll just follow up with, you mentioned some statistics, etc., on the science of this, because I think earlier on, when vapes became really popularised, and I guess they've been around longer than we can think, probably more than the 2 or 3 years that I would think. But earlier on, there wasn't much knowledge about the dangers of it compared to what we knew about tobacco smoking. So is the science really up to it now to prove that it is as dangerous as it is?
I was really hesitant. If I go back to the notes I made, we haven't had long enough to get that critical body of evidence. There's a lack of long-term clinical data. Studies are underway. I mentioned formaldehyde and lung cancer risk. The other one is around nitrosamine ketone and the health risks around that for long-term vapors. The Cancer Society is very slow to move when it comes to evidence. We need a huge critical body of evidence before we will come out and say tobacco smoking is bad or vaping is bad. We are particularly interested in the space and watching it closely. We are not prepared at this stage, my understanding is, to come out and say that there is a direct link, but the body of evidence is building.
And I would just add to that nicotine increases the blood pressure, which then makes you more prone to or at risk of heart attack.
I'm really sorry, but I have to go.
Nope, that's all good. Look, we can finish this up now. I have an urge for recommendation, but I'm not going to suggest that we do one for the simple reason. Look, my biggest concern around vaping is the hijacking of delivery by tobacco companies, fundamentally. I know the intent of the vaping system was to actually be a pathway for removal. Unfortunately, the people that developed this sold the rights, and it's now being used as a delivery mechanism for nicotine. So there's a big misconception, certainly in America, as youth, with regards to vaping being safe, and it's not. But I would like to flag that we are having our policy reviewed in this space, and I think it's a no-brainer that everyone, or the majority of people around this table, would support vaping being a significant aspect of that. how we approach that, or that will need to be discussed, and we will work through that as well. So I want to thank you very much for coming in today and bringing this information to us and allowing for the conversation. I think we want to be proactive in this space. We need to be proactive in this space, otherwise we've got a smoking catastrophe coming down the pipeline, very, very similar. And Chris would like to say a few words to finish off there as well.
Yes, and working with our broader colleagues really in the space, I just do want to highlight the last page that was familiar to you, which set out what other parts of this region are doing. I just did want to note that one area that we will look at, which is not within the scope of the smoke-free policy, is council operations policy around smoke-free. So last time, actually, the smoke-free team joined us, and they did raise a challenge to us to consider our own position on that. So when you look at this, you will see that currently we don't have anything around that. So I just did want to acknowledge that we were looking at that as well. And when we come back to you to talk about the smoke-free policy, the idea of bylaws and our strategy, we'll be looking at a suite of things and levers that we might be able to pull in the space to ensure that we walk the talk, but also are stepping in the right direction to ensure that we are optimising the health of people in our community.
Thank you very much for those comments, Chris. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time and coming in today. I potentially think you may be called on again to come and maybe talk as part of a workshop that we may have on this. But Chris will organise that and be back to you about that. But again, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, on to item 7.2, Te Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre. Come on up, Dave. Now, this is a presentation with regards to our community centre, our Paraparaumu Community Centre, which is Tino, and what are we going to be doing in this space, which is I know is an item close to some members' hearts, including mine. So very much looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, Morena koutou. We are pleased to be here today to give you an update on work underway around Te Newhanga, the Kāpiti Community Centre. I would like to start by acknowledging apologies from Morag Taimaliatani, who is working with Dave on this project, but is unfortunately doing much more difficult mahi at the moment at home with sick children. So I will do my best to share with you alongside Dave what Morag might have. So, background. You will have heard us tell you, either here or at council, some of these things before. But I think it's always important to remind you of some of the important aspects before we kick into giving you an update of the progress that we've made since the last time we spoke to council. So as you can see on the slide there, we're talking about a facility that was originally built by the community for the community through a significant fundraising effort and opened in 1996. Peak leaky building period, as it turns out, hence where we are today. I will always want to acknowledge Te Newhanga, the name of the facility, gifted by Te Uri o Te Ngarara, the local hapu, and it's something that the project team is very conscious of when we're working through this project. Other than that, I think I'll leave the rest of the slide to be something you can read the detail on if you like, but I guess the only other piece of background to acknowledge is that we said that we would come back to this subcommittee to keep you updated with the progress we were making, and that's the reason why we're here today. I'm going to hand over to Dave for a bit.
Right. Okay. So just updating on progress. So we have established a project governance board and a project control group. So the project governance board is run by council officers, and the role of that is to oversee the governance, the project from a governance perspective. So especially around program and budget, that kind of thing. And that consists of the project sponsor from SLT, second SLT member, and then officers from around council, so such as economic development, that kind of area, and obviously the owners of the project, so the business owners, the Connected Communities team. And then we have a project control group, which is really a steering group which looks after the day-to-day running of the project, trying to keep it moving along, and it's just where we can sort of have a touch point where we can come together with the different parts of council to make sure we're all working together in the same direction. And the other thing that we have reached out to Ariawa Ki Whakarongatai Charitable Trust, as we'd like them to come along with us on this journey, and we've asked if they would like to have a member to serve on those two boards. The next big piece of work that we've done is we have currently a live needs assessment on GETS, and that is through an RFP. And the idea of the needs assessment is to create a clear picture of the unmet social and community needs to ensure that any development of the building results in it being fit for purpose, inclusive, responsive, and supports the appropriate outcomes. And the RFP will close late August, and we expect that to take 3 months to complete. So hopefully we can be back to council around just before Christmas to update on how that RFP and what the outcomes and what the needs of the community are. So obviously we're just remaining linked into other community projects, and just ensuring we've got strategic alignment, and that does include also the Wellington group on the land that's directly in behind the community centre. We're also investigating and looking to further develop the meanwhile space design concept, and looking to complete some more structural assessments on the building, just to ensure that when we get the needs assessment, we are ready to roll and ready to do something with the building, should that be the outcome. So we've now got a clearer sense of what our actions are and how the project is going to progress and what our timeframes are, and we are looking to ensure that we begin engaging with the community and social sector stakeholders, especially, as well as the people that put the community centre together, the founders of that. And we are going to, in the next month, look to organise a sector workshop to get together with the social sector. The social sector workshop. And the other thing, just want to point out that we really do feel it's important to get the building tidied up and get some improved fencing and make it look a bit better. That we do care about the building, even though it's not able to be used. So yeah, look, that's just a really brief update. Welcome any questions or discussion. Oh.
No, don't apologise, Dave. No. I just want to reinforce a couple of points that Dave has made. He's talked about the strategic alignment of this project with others, and I feel like I need to reassure at least councillor Spires, if not other councillors, that the relationship between this project, the investigation of an indoor sports facility, consideration of an education hub as Dave has acknowledged, understanding what might happen just over the back fence with the Wellington Company, and obviously other key projects within the town centre those are important alignments that we are working on as part of this project. And in terms of those governance bodies that Dave talked about for the project, sort of internal governance, good project governance, there are representatives from teams that are working across those other activities on both bodies so that we can make sure that these pieces of work are as connected as they can be, noting that they are also independent pieces of work with their own timeframes attached to them. And whilst we're really keen to ensure alignment, everything landing at the same time in a perfect kind of way is unlikely to be something that we'll be able to achieve. So that's all I really wanted to say, and as Dave said, we are very happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Janice. I have a few questions, but I'm happy to go to the table first. Perhaps Janet, you might be interested in starting off.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to dig a little bit more, if you've got any offhand, off-the-cuff information into the needs assessment. How have our community groups been going? Have they got other spaces that they use? I'm thinking of the Impact Hub across the way. This community centre has been used in a variety of different ways over the years. Rooms for hire, permanent tenants were in there for quite some time. Did we look back and think about the uses over the years, or did we just look at the way the centre was run most recently? And what kind of information has that thrown up?
So we are just at the start of the needs assessment process. So we are out to tender on the GETS website for some people to come in and help us with that. All of the things that you've described will be considerations as part of that work, alongside other information that helps paint a picture of the current social and community needs that might be unmet within the community, that the community centre could potentially meet. So I guess the evidence base that we will develop to inform recommendations to this council about where to next with the community centre will draw on all of the things that you've referenced and an understanding of what the current and future situation is likely to be too.
And I'm presuming the review, the point in time that we're at with the Zeal Youth Centre will form quite a significant part of that as well?
Yes, it will. So existing relationships and contracts with organisations or groups where there is potential alignment is within scope of what we're exploring at the moment. And we've had a very initial conversation with Zeal about the need to bring those things together.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Nigel.
Yep. A couple of questions. Is the size of the footprint, can the size of the footprint be expanded from what it currently is? And if it can, or even if it can't, the option of a multi-storey building on that site, is that something that's being considered? And I've got some others as well.
So the work that we've had done focused predominantly on the footprint that we have in doing up the building. If we went outside the footprint, it doubled the price of the building. So that kind of answers that. Going up is an option that we will be looking at, yes.
Okay. And so is the bulldozer option still a live option?
I think at this stage everything's on the table.
Oh, okay. And so assuming the bulldozer option is the one, because it looks a sensible one to me, but I'm not a builder, so I would like to see Murray Jensen had which a lot of people might not remember Murray, but as former deputy mayor at council here, and Murray had a really important role in the building of that centre. In fact, the main room is called the Murray Jensen room, After him, he actually put quite a bit of personal money in it and raised money through Westpac because he was the CEO of Westpac or whatever it was at the time. So I'd like to see, I'd like to see that history carried through somehow, so that there's at least a recognition of that, even if it's just the ghost of the previous building. Just in terms of its function, I can remember back in the day when Pat Cumming, who a number of people may remember, Pat was the centre manager over there. The place absolutely thrived. She was brilliant in terms of a model. I think that was a superb model that worked really well. So sometimes going back and having a look at the history of when something was in its heyday, and then asking, well, why was it a heyday, and can we replicate that? So I know it's difficult if people weren't here at that time to get that. So you will actually get that through community members will presumably give you that kind of feedback. And my last thing was really about the role of the Paraparumu Community Board. So I presume they're actively involved in the... Is someone from the Community Board, for instance, part of the project governance group or board?
The project governance board is just internal KCDC staff, council officers, yeah. But we are going to update the community board and are happy to and welcome to work with them and anybody really on the project. And as for the historical stuff, that is something that's definitely on our radar, and we are definitely want to engage and talk to people, and we'll take that on board.
Brilliant. Yep.
Thanks, Nigel. Johnny?
Yeah, I noticed there was some talk there about an educational hub, and I know that the economic development team's been sort of doing some work in that regard. Is it sort of going to be, is the educational hub going to be sort of incorporated into this community centre, or is it going to be a separate sort of building or venue or something like that?
It is a totally separate project, but we are working closely with Darren and the team.
Thank you.
The reason for that is that as part of work on the Education Hub, the EDKB has flagged that they see potential benefit in an education hub existing alongside some other kind of community facility. That is about where the detail of the conversation starts and stops at the moment, but we'll be exploring that further as the project progresses. Chris may have a comment to make.
Sorry, thank you. Just to note that as we are refreshing the economic development strategy, that'll be an element of work that we are working through with you. So the work to date around the Education Hub has been really focused on understanding what's needed. The next steps will be coming through as part of our refresh, so we'll be able to work through and explore how we do line up or what next steps would be. And some of the obvious things that we will be looking at is some of the partnerships we may have with others in the community to progress some of the work in that space.
Make a comment?
I was going to, don't worry, Kathy, I was going to come to you in just a second. Johnny, have you finished? Okay. Look, before I do, I just want to comment on one other thing. You know, say we've got questions up on the screen at the moment. Having been on the other side of the equation, while that's up, it's very, very difficult for people on screen to engage with the meeting. I was just wondering, is it possible when we get to question time on there that can be brought off as such? Because it's very hard to see hands up and things like that.
That's helpful, thank you.
just a little thing, having been on that other side now. Kathy, I was going to ask whether you had comment in regards to this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just sitting here thinking that this council, we're coming up with our smoking, drinking and gambling policies, and that's taking away and sorting out all of those things. So we need to put our money where our mouth is and do something positive So we need to get on with our community centre, our indoor sports and rec centre, and our education hub, because otherwise socially, we need to put as much focus on our social environment in our communities as what we do on everything else. And my feeling at the moment is our social environment is lagging behind, and what's happening out in the community is not good. So those were just my comments, and we need to stop mucking around and getting on with these things and doing something positive. So, you know, trying to getting young people to give up vaping and smoking and all of this, we need to give them somewhere to go and something to do that's positive and good for their health. And rather than just saying, no, you're not allowed to vape or smoke or drink, then what else do we expect them to do if there's nowhere for them to go? So that's just my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kathy. It's a very valid point. If we are going to be asking and removing things from people, we do need to make sure we've got activities for them to do. I know that we have a lot of engagement in our sports and recreation up on the Kāpiti coast. We just need to make sure the capacity is there to support all that. And maybe that's something we can go to government about with regards to some additional funding maybe in that space for that specific reason, because I don't think this is necessarily something government's even really thought about a heck of a lot. Look, I have a couple of things as well. First one for me is that I appreciate we have 2 internal groups, but I would like to see a local advisory group or a local working group. It would be great to have a community board member on there as well, even both community boards. Even if at this stage there's not a heck of a lot to talk about, it would be good to get that ball rolling. If that could be looked at sooner rather than later would be much. Yes, certainly.
It's my expectation that the establishment of a group like that will come out of the social sector workshop that we've highlighted as an important next step for us.
Excellent. I'm actually going to hold off the rest of my questions for the moment. Lawrence has popped his hand up online. Lawrence, if you care to have care to take the mic.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Oh, that's good. Really great to see this this update on progress. I know this is a very complex area with many different streams that flow into it. I guess from my involvement with the social and community sector, I'm interested in this workshop and where that's going and how we can work in with that. I know our sector is very, at the moment, very positive about how we can be involved and working forward with council in this space. So just want to encourage the team, keep talking, particularly across the sector, and we can hopefully bring something that we can land that's going to be good for our young people, for our community moving forward. I note that it's been 2 years since this building was closed down, so I think we need to be pretty proactive in terms of getting some stuff happening pretty quickly in this space. So thanks, team. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lawrence. I think that very succinct point around the timing as such. Is there any comment around that at all?
Only to acknowledge that staff are, very aware of the need to make progress with this piece of work and how long that centre has been closed for. And although it's only one bullet point on a slide in terms of the social sector workshop and the comments that Councillor Kirby has made around the eagerness and willingness of the social and community sector to be involved, I'm pleased to hear it, because it might only be one bullet point on one of our next steps slides, but we see that as a fundamentally important step to take next. Now that we've managed to get ourselves organised in the right way and get the project established in the right way, which is critical for actually being able to maintain a good rate of progress once we kick things off with the sector.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Janice. And look, regards to this workshop that's being talked about here, is there any time frame for that at the moment at all?
We're hoping to get out some invites in the next couple of weeks and have it within a month's time.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mayor Holborough.
Yeah, I'm just interested in digging a little bit into where this sits in our organisation, because it seems to me from what I'm getting around the table, we've got a strong desire to deliver a space for people to be in and to use for these activities. Where at the moment this is sitting firmly in the kind of people space. So I'm wondering, when does this feed into, and we're doing a separate piece of work around similar facilities in the place and space team at the same time as we're doing a facilities review in the place and space team. Surely this should be an adjunct to that rather than a separate piece of work in the people and partnerships team. I'm just keen that we're not doubling up and we're not creating extra work that's going to delay the project.
Thank you for the question. I actually will add to that a little bit as well. And what I mean by add to that, I do wonder on the scope of this project, like the Mayor has said, more around if we are looking at our town centre development and our vision work with regards to what we want to achieve, perhaps even in a civic precinct, whether this conversation ties into a much larger conversation as well. And again, without doubling up on resources, but ensuring that across our different departments, people are working together. Is there an approach that's being looked at in that space at all? Would that be a fair add-on to that?
Yeah.
So I guess the responsibility for delivery of this project is sitting within our PMO. I am currently the sponsor of the project, but Mike Mendonça, GM Place and Space, is the second GM that is on the project governance group. There is also Darren Grant, Strategic Development Director, Strategic Development, ensuring that the strategy and growth group's work is strongly reflected in the project. So although you see myself and other staff from the People and Partnership Group playing a role in a key role in working alongside the PMO, it is genuinely a cross-council piece of work. Whether or not it is, I guess, I don't believe that the People and Partnerships Group having a key role as a delay or creates a disconnect across those other projects. One of the things that I think is important for the community centre project is that community needs and the people of the district are reflected in our thinking about how we approach what could easily just be seen as a project about the condition of a building. The community centre has always been, since the moment it was established, in thought before it even physically existed, about the people of the district. And I guess unashamedly, that's what I hope my group keeps front and centre in this process.
So just to respond to that, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. So maybe it's the other way around. Maybe I'm just keen to see how our facilities review and this piece of work intersect and interact. You're telling me that they are, which is great to hear, but I'm not seeing a synergy between the two pieces of work communicated through. And I'm just keen to understand a little bit more about that, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to prioritise and we're going to have to build something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what I'm focused on. So yeah, I'm just keen to see, just keen for more information about how those two pieces of work intersect.
Look, I hear you and I understand where your questions are coming from, and I think the onus is on me and Mike to make sure that at the appropriate time there is an opportunity for all of these things to be workshopped together here in this chamber with you, and to make sure we avoid a situation where we're taking a siloed approach to bringing these different kaupapa before you. So I have heard you, and I will come back on what that could look like.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I was going to add that point of conversation as well, whether this needs to be flipped and looking at it from a strategic perspective with regards to what are we trying to deliver in the space, taking into consideration the development that Ian Castles is doing, as well as potential for Wow Song and the aspirations of our local mana whenua, Puketapu Hapu or Ngahina Trust with regards to potential joint partnerships in that space as well, whether they're all being considered as such. Did you want to comment at all, Chris?
I can say that we have mentioned to you before with what I'm calling the precinct from 77 to 109 through actually to coastlands now, that we are in conversations, and Ian Castles and his team are talking with a range of people about opportunities. And I have mentioned to you before that they are very open to considering how they may contribute with their development contribution to supporting our aspirations. I think in balanced with that will be the trade-off around timing and whether there's interim steps that we want to take, acknowledging some of the comments around the table of actually I think there's been intention and aspiration to have something stood up for some time, and we are at the moment looking at what we can do. So it may be what is our initial step, and then what are, through this, and then what are the opportunities for the longer term through the work that we do with that group. So I think it's an and rather than an or, and I think that the team quite rightly is looking at what can we do right now to meet those aspirations, which is the right thing to do.
Thank you for that, Chris. Lawrence, you've got your hand up on your screen. Just checking whether you something else wanted to add to the conversation.
Yeah, there was. Thanks for this conversation. It's helpful. As I said, it's a complex area where there's a lot of potential streams flowing into this particular work. I want to add another one. I know one of the things that's talking about, and I know you've listed on here as a needs assessment that's already on GETS. I'm assuming that needs assessment is specifically related to the community centre.
Not specifically, in that we will be undertaking a needs assessment to inform the development of options around the community centre. But we anticipate that the needs assessment will highlight information that can be used across a range of different projects or initiatives within council. I guess a high-level description of the scope of the needs assessment is wanting to understand unmet social and community needs within the district. So I hope that it's a yes. It highlights what's needed in the community centre, but also highlights some other things that are useful in other places too. That's our intention.
So just for my own clarity, are you saying that needs assessment would be similar to the housing needs assessment that has gone on, except it would be looking at the community and social sector instead?
So similar in terms of it seeks to understand a broad range of needs that might then be narrowed down to understand what's required in one space. We certainly will not want to be duplicating work that has already been undertaken as part of a housing needs assessment. The housing needs assessment is potentially something that whoever we engage to do this piece of work with us might look to in terms of how this has happened in the district before and whether it provides a blueprint for how we could go about doing this particular piece of work. But that's the kind of thing that we will explore with the people that put bids forward for this piece of work.
Okay. If you'll just humour me for a second, Mr. Chair. I had a meeting with some key leaders in our social and community sector actually on Monday. And one of the things that was very clearly identified and continues to be an issue for us as a sector is the lack of cohesive and comprehensive data and information around our sector, what the needs are, what the gaps are, from a wide perspective. There's the odd little bit here and there. So I'm just suggesting that maybe this needs assessment that is being proposed or is currently on GETS could look at something broader and bigger, so that we're not doubling up, because I would suggest that there is an absolute need, in the same way that our housing needs assessment led us to inform our housing strategy and has resulted in funding from central government into housing. I think we also need that across the board within our community and social sector. As we all know, central government looks at Kāpiti and has a particular view. Those of us in the sector would say that that view is very different to what is the reality on the ground for all of us. Even just going back to the diagrams and maps that were presented as part of the smoke-free and vape-free presentation, if you look at the deprivation index of some of the areas across Kāpiti Coast, at least two of them, including our significant metropolitan area of Paraparaumu and Otaki, were up in the 9 and 10s. Now, I'm not sure that central government realises that that's this case and the issues that we're facing. So I would suggest that we need to explore that as part of this needs assessment, as what would be a comprehensive one that provides us with a picture of the wider social and community needs within the Kāpiti Coast District.
So I think there's a significant offline conversation needed around all of that, but fundamentally, I agree that there is the potential that the community centre needs assessment could go a long way towards highlighting that. Staff involved in the project have worked with staff from the Strategy and Growth Group to look at how this piece of work will line up with other work that explores needs. So I guess I want to reassure you that it's not happening in isolation. We do expect that a conversation around the needs assessment and would form a significant part of the sector workshop, and that I think is a great place to explore many of the points that you've highlighted. But also, I think it will be important for the project team working via our Connected Communities team to understand the feedback from the meeting earlier this week with sector leaders, and make sure that we're plugging that into to our work right now ahead of that workshop. So I think there's an offline conversation in there with you and others, Councillor Kirby.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me ask some second lot of questions. Thanks.
No troubles at all, Lawrence. I just note there that that Chris would like to comment on that as well.
Thank you. Just to add on to the comments that Janice has made, quite rightly, Deputy Mayor Kubi, you've referenced the information and evidence that our colleagues from Smokefree and the National Public Health Service put on the table. As we step into the health strategy space, what we are proposing to do is look across the wider spectrum of services in our district, which will inevitably link health and social services together. And so we hope that we'll be able to look at the provision of services and any gaps through that lens, through that process as well. I would like to just add that I think it's common practice when you go out for procurement purposes for things like facilities, that the needs assessment is quite targeted to that project, which is what you will see in that procurement package. And it's not to say that's the only thing we're focused on. So I just want to confirm that we very much are going to be looking to put what I'm calling the ecosystem of what's happening in the district on the table, and that will be with input from the health and social sector that's in Kāpiti.
Thank you for that, Chris. I'd also like to add that we did a presentation to the Select Committee a couple of days ago. That was actually the Social Services Committee. And we must have hit a button, because we've been invited to speak further next week around that. So I'll just flag that maybe there'll be some briefing that could occur around that leading into that conversation. But one of the points that was highlighted, we had done our housing needs assessment at our cost, when actually that's a central government deliverable. And one wonders whether, if we're looking at a wider district, social needs, whether that's something that government should be funding rather than us as well. But that's something we could talk to at that committee. So very timely that that's actually happened. Look, I'm just noting I'm being relatively lenient with regards to the questioning simply because we're good on time, and the topics we've got should fit within the timeframes quite nicely. So Nigel, you have something else?
Yeah, thank you. Having set the precedent with Larry, that was excellent. Well done, yeah. No, I just made a note here too about any sort of social and sector needs assessment. There should be government assistance in that. We should be trying to tap into that somewhere. One way of having considering what the unmet needs are is to have a look at what the previous needs were, the previous needs that were met by this particular thing. The other note of caution here is that when you link this in with town centre developments and what Ian Castle's plans may or may not be, that really gives you the potential for significant delays. Some people who were here 20 years ago will have been involved in the really intense discussions around the new town centre that we were developing. And 20 years later, we're still having intense discussions about what the town centre might look like. So we have that, there's that balance between what is an immediate need. Well, it was an immediate need 2 years ago, and so it hasn't got any less immediate because of that. So, yeah, I would just be warning some caution about that when you start diving down these other rabbit holes that it just further and further delays something that needs to be done soon. The other consideration, and one of the things that caused issues with the previous community centre, is it kind of changed its. It became a different kind of beast, and it got to a point where it wasn't economically. It was difficult, and so it came back to council. Then there were various models that were tried and failed. So one of the, in terms of how that management's going to go. What the OPEX is going to be going forward. I mean, we've had some surprises about OPEX, and so I really think if we go into this with a really clear picture to the public and to councillors about, so what will the OPEX likely be going forward, and because then it needs to be fitted into obviously LTPs, etc. So it's quite often it's easy to find the funding to build a building, and then you've got to staff it. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Nigel. And that's sort of been looked at as well. I think the term meantime space has been considered as well with regards to more immediate solutions, while the larger conversation is had around what we do for general delivery in that space. Looks like you have a comment over there.
I was just going to say that, yeah, the operational costs and model will definitely be considered and will be part of the package we bring. Yeah.
And if I may, to your point around not wanting to wait forever for other people to figure out what they're going to do with their land that borders on us, that borders this. I think that's probably what I had intended to try and emphasise when I said we are looking at the alignment and very focused on the alignment of all of these different pieces of work, but we're unlikely to be able to reach perfection, which would be everything happening all at once in a coordinated way. That might have been code for alignment is important, but we need to make progress with this important piece of work as well. So I just want to reassure you that that is very front of mind for the project team.
Okay, I've got a couple of comments I'd like to finish off with. I noted the reference to Tatiawa Charitable Trust with regards to involvement, but I just do want to flag that we've got local hapu here as well. I know the trust can have capacity issue, but we have Pukitapu ki Paraparaumu as a local hapu, and we also have the hapu that gifted the name, Te Uri o Te Naara, and I'd like to make sure that we have a good relationship with both those groups. As well. I think it also should be noted, I noticed in regards to the screenshots there, the presentation that you talked about the gifting of the name, but I think it needs to be noted Nahina Trust or Nahina who gifted the land as well, because that's a significant part of this equation as the purpose that land was gifted for. As such. And just wanted to check, are we building that relationship with Nahina Trust in regards to this conversation as we move forward in a proactive manner?
So started that question in the way that my teenagers in the house do so well. We have had in the past specific conversations with the Newhanga Trust about this project and the potential for partnership opportunities in there. At the Trust's request, the conversations were put on hold while they explored other arrangements for their holdings within the town centre. As part of this, next phase of the project, we will be wanting to re-engage with the Trust. Yes, absolutely, we are very aware of the importance of the relationships with Puketapu Hapu in this area, and at the Te Whakaminenga meeting this week, where we did give a brief update on this project to the committee, we heard from Andre that Atiawa will be coming back to us, hopefully with some thoughts on how we start all of those conversations, including with Te Atiawa in the next wee while. So we look forward to that clarity.
Yes, and I dare say timely that their appointment of a new CEO, which I think is an excellent step with regards to helping bring the capability aspects of the Charitable Trust into line with being able to support council work would be is a great step in that direction with regards to strong relationships that we have there. Only other thing I'm worried about is we're talking about tidying the building up. I'll be a little bit wary of the expense of that. Otherwise, we're potentially just throwing good money after bad. I wouldn't want to see a lot of money spent in that direction.
When I say tidy the building up, I mean like cleaning the gutters out so there's not grass growing out the gutters and just weed eating in behind the fences, that kind of thing. So it's a little bit more presentable.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy with all that. I was surprised, Chris. I saw there was a sold sign on the Placemakers building. I thought maybe we might have purchased that, but got a funny feeling it was more than likely out of our stretch. Okay, so we'll close that one off if no one's got any other comments. And I think at this stage, it's just after 11 o'clock. We'll break for a cup of coffee and tea, and then we'll come back to members' business after that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave and the team, coming on today. Much appreciated.
What time are we coming back?
We'll come back, just 10 minutes, 20 past.
20 past?